Welcome to another episode of Left Coast Sports with Jon Schaeffer, and this week I'll be joined by the editor-in-chief of Blogging the Boys, RJ Ochoa. We're going to discuss the expectations for the Dallas Cowboys this season. We'll talk about Dak Prescott's health, the state of the NFC East, and whether or not the Cowboys are a legitimate Super Bowl contender in their second season under Mike McCarthy. RJ runs the definitive Cowboys blog site, bloggingtheboys.com. He also does a daily Blogging the Boys podcast with the latest news and notes on the team. His content is a great resource for Cowboys fans. As always, though, before we get started with today's episode, please give us an auto download on your podcast platform. You get future episodes automatically if you do that. Left Coast Sports is basically everywhere. Apple Podcasts, the free iHeartRadio app. You can watch on YouTube. You can listen on Spotify. You can leave reviews as well. We always appreciate those. And while you're here and listening, please give me a follow on Twitter at Jon Schaeffer. That's JONSCHAEFFER. Believe it or not, it's been a quarter century since the Cowboys last made a Super Bowl run. How close are they to their next run? Here's my conversation with RJ Ochoa. All right, RJ, are there any concerns with Dak Prescott's health heading into 2021 after suffering that horrific ankle injury last October?
Related to the 2020 injury, no. His ankle totally seems fine. Obviously, this muscle strain has been something that popped up over the last couple of weeks, and it doesn't look like he's playing in the preseason game on Saturday, which would have been the only game he would have seen if this had never even happened. But I'd say the only concern is that the Cowboys have kind of moved the goalposts a little bit. When it first happened, it was he's going to miss a couple of days and he's going to miss a week. They were scrimmaging against the Los Angeles Rams shortly after that. So it was going to hold him through that. And it's just kind of been these incremental things that they've just kind of continually added. And so I think that has kind of added to the pressure that people feel about it, or the panic. And so you do have some people, I think, that are getting kind of some cabin fever with it and getting antsy. But he has been throwing, granted, on a pitch count and in a light sense in practice. So it's not like that hasn't happened, like they've been completely holding him back 100%. He's obviously, the star of Hard Knocks, and so he has a lot of attention on him. And so that in itself kind of brings with it some added perception that things aren't going right. But all does seem well, all things considered, right now.
Is it a lot to ask to go from not playing since last October to not playing in the preseason to start week one on that Thursday in Tampa?
I think so. I mean, certainly in a vacuum. And I mean, I don't know that I feel or view the preseason as being valuable for Dak. I mean, he's entering his sixth year in the NFL. It's not like he, is a young player that doesn't know what he's doing. But I do think there's something to that, game speed and feeling normal. And I don't know that Dak is going to doubt himself. But something I've thought a lot about in the weeks since the muscle strain is in his press conference when he did get paid. He talked about how he realizes the financial commitment that the Cowboys have made to him with his new contract, and how he's got to be cognizant of that. And I'm fascinated to see how that plays itself out. I don't know if it means, if it's 3rd and 8 and Dak's scrambling for a first down and he picks up 6 yards, is he going to reach for those 2 extra yards, or is he going to duck out of bounds in the interest of health? That's the kind of thing that I'm always interested to see with players, whatever injury they're coming back from. And so I think that right now they've just kind of gotten some tunnel vision on getting ready for week one. And I think that, the preseason is kind of a trial and error experiment in a lot of ways. And so I do think the first month of the season, first 2-3 weeks are kind of some like a crash course for players getting back into like tackling shape and things like that. And so I fully trust that Dak will be ready and kind of tried and true and ready to go. But I don't just because I don't think it's sustainable or likely. I don't think he'll have the statistical performances he had when he was hurt, and that will lead people to wonder, oh man, he's not throwing for 350 yards a game. What happened? Is he regressing, et cetera? But that's just not the kind of game the Cowboys want to play anymore. So I think there's a number of factors involved there, but ultimately I think he's probably ready. But the Cowboys, you can make an argument that they're 2 of their 3 toughest games are their first 2 weeks of the season, which is also going to add to this whole conversation.
Are you surprised somewhat that they haven't gone out to sign a veteran backup quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, that's we joke about it, which is why I'm kind of laughing. The way that Dak even became the Cowboys quarterback. For anyone who doesn't remember, 5 years ago, the Cowboys were coming off of the 2015 season where they went 4-12 and they went 1-11 in games without Tony Romo. And so, you would have thought that offseason they would have added somebody, it was, not apples to apples. Romo was definitely, I don't know if I would say injury prone, but he was definitely more prone to injury then than Dak certainly is now, especially dealing with back injuries and things like that. But they didn't sign anybody that year in 2016. They had the 4th overall pick, and they drafted Zeke Elliott. They missed on Paxton Lynch. They missed on Connor Cook, and they had to settle for Dak Prescott. But their backup quarterback at the time that they went into training camp with was actually their current offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. And Kellen broke his ankle during training camp, which elevated Dak to QB2 status, then a 4th-round rookie, obviously. And then Tony gets hurt in the preseason, and the rest is kind of where we're at now. And so I would have thought that lesson would have been enough to have convinced them that they need a fair and competent backup quarterback. But even that next year in 2017, Dak's primary backup was at the time a rookie undrafted free agent in Cooper Rush, who hung around and was his backup all the way through the end of the Jason Garrett era. And that's why I really applauded what Mike McCarthy did last year in signing Andy Dalton, because, I think if your quarterback goes down the way Dak did, I think your season's over. But if you need a guy to play a 2-3 game stretch, I do think Andy could have done that for the Cowboys last year. And certainly is capable of that even now, though the expectation for him in Chicago is a little bit different. But so all that being said, I mean, the Cowboys just ran it back. They have Garrett Gilbert, who they did sign in the middle of last season. He played well against Pittsburgh last year, but then Andy Dalton returned. And they also have brought back Cooper Rush, and they've got Ben DiNucci, who they drafted in the 7th round last year. So there is a sense of logic to, if Dak goes down, the season's over. But, that's if he goes down for good. If he goes down for just a month, you need that guy. And I don't think Garrett Gilbert is that guy. He has separated himself from the rest of the field in terms of the competition in Dallas. But and I don't know any team that has a backup quarterback that I feel supremely great about. But you would have thought the Cowboys would have invested more at the very least.
If Dak is able to stay healthy, what are your expectations for the offense in 2021?
It's such an interesting question. I think that they will be among the most efficient offenses in the NFL. And that's the word I'm choosing to use, because I think people expect them to, be number one in total yards and be number one in different capacities like that. But again, that's not what they want to play. They don't want to be the team that they were during the first 4 weeks of last season. And so they want to be more balanced. The defense should be better. And I think, I would say my favorite stat, but it's a really depressing stat. The 4 games that Dak played entirely last year, the Cowboys offense started a possession on the positive side of the 50-yard line twice. Once was after an interception against the Rams, and the other was after the watermelon onside kick that the Cowboys had against Atlanta. And so part of the reason why they were able to, be this like high performing offense from a statistical standpoint was because every offensive drive had to go 77 yards, 80 yards, 82 yards, whatever. And to their credit, they did it a lot, but that just isn't sustainable. And so I think that their defenses will force shorter fields, whether by punts or turnovers. I think that they'll run the ball. So I think that they will be incredibly efficient. I think they'll probably still be a top 5 offense in terms of generic calculations, but I don't see any reason why they can't be among the most efficient offenses in the NFL.
Do you think it was an obvious choice to go with Micah Parsons, the Penn State linebacker who didn't play in 2020 because of the pandemic, but had, an unbelievable collegiate career at Penn State? What made him the obvious choice for the Cowboys, in your opinion?
Picks 8 and 9. The Carolina Panthers took J.C. Horn, and the Denver Broncos took Patrick Surtain, and the Cowboys were all in on one of those 2 corners. And so that was truly, we were doing a live show at Blogging the Boys, and when the moment it happened, it was kind of like, okay, what should we do? And like just every single comment, trade back, because that was your like, I always forget if it's DEFCON. I think DEFCON 1 is the most dangerous. I always want to say it's 5, but that was true. DEFCON 1, smash the glass, whatever. And so a lot of people were disappointed with that pick, just because the resource of, it became the 12th overall pick because of the trade back with Philly, but the resource of even a top 12 pick being spent on a linebacker is not exactly a great utilization of resources in terms of cost efficiency in the NFL. And so people were bummed for a long time. Micah has, I think, really lived up to the hype so far. And he has also allowed for the Cowboys to effectively move on from Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith. Obviously, they're still part of the team, but that is a huge step in the right direction for the Cowboys, because they've been tied to them for the last 2 years, despite, underperforming performances. And so he has become the right pick. But, given the circumstances they were in, I do think that they acted smoothly to be able to pick up a 3rd round pick. And an underrated element of that, I'm higher on the Eagles personally than the Giants, but I get it if people believe in the Giants offense and their personnel. If the Cowboys hadn't traded with the Eagles, Devontae Smith would have gone to New York with the 11th overall pick. So they effectively chose which NFC East team they wanted Devontae Smith to end up on. And so it wasn't exactly two birds, one stone, but it was an interesting move to say the least.
Will Micah have to be eased in at all because he didn't play in 2020 and he went something like 500 days between games, or will they be comfortable getting him some reps in the preseason? He'll be ready to rock and roll come week one.
I thought he would, just because that would make sense to your point. But he's not only playing, he's not only active, he at times is calling the defensive plays. I mean, he's really been impressive in every capacity. And so he's said all the right things. There were mild character, I wouldn't say mild, there were character concerns about him, obviously, as well. But in every sense, he has been an ideal first round pick and been the guy that looks to be the future face and future kind of galvanizing force of the defense.
Sell me on the Cowboys defense that was historically bad last year. Obviously, they add Micah Parsons. Where else will they be better?
It's not an easy sell, to be honest. But I mean, this sounds like a joke, but I mean, they won't be that bad because it's statistically difficult to be that bad. There generally is, if you are at one end of a spectrum, some regression to the mean. And so, I mean, I think that's a play here. But I think from a personnel standpoint, they obviously added Micah Parsons. Their secondary is still weak because they did miss out on either of the top two corners. But Dan Quinn has arrived and really kind of changed a lot of things. He's brought in some taller corners, some players who have some more size and some more athleticism in that capacity. The Cowboys drafted Nishan Wright in the third round, who fits his profile. And I think, the X factor of the Cowboys defense is Randy Gregory, who's somebody that a lot of NFL fans may or may not be aware of. The Cowboys did spend their second round draft pick on him in 2015. And since then, it's just been, he's suspended. He's not suspended. He's allowed to be around the team. He's not allowed to be around the team, kind of situation almost by a month basis. And so this offseason, rules changed and violations changed and things like that with respect to what led to Randy Gregory not being allowed to be around his team. And so this is his first full offseason in the year 2021 with the Cowboys since his rookie year in 2015. He has flashed at times that he has played, but it's been an inordinately long time since he's played an entire full season. And so that's a fair concern. And so I think if he provides any sense of an edge rush opposite of DeMarcus Lawrence, I think that has to help the defense overall. And again, you have more stable play at the linebacker position and Micah Parsons. And so all that with, again, the notion that it would be very difficult to be that bad 2 years in a row, I think leads to them being, I don't think they're a top 10 defense. I don't know that they're even a top 12 or 14 defense, but they'll be somewhere in the neck of the woods between 16 and 20. And I coupled with the offense they had and their overall structure of their team, I think that's enough to do some damage.
So anything short of what, in your opinion, would be a disappointment for the Cowboys this season?
Man, I think that is such a context, specific question. And because Mike McCarthy was hired specifically because this team was viewed to be, that away, a head coach away. This is a team with a lot of talent, certainly a lot of offensive talent. And now you've got a lot of new talent on the defensive side of the ball. And so, if I, a lot of Cowboys fans will hear what I'm about to say as an answer and be like, that's so lame, the expectation to be to win the Super Bowl. But truly, I think the answer is an NFC title game appearance. I mean, this team, people talk about the Super Bowl drought. The NFC title game appearance drought is the same. They haven't appeared in an NFC championship game since 1995. The only teams that have gone that long without even an appearance are the Detroit Lions and Washington football team. And so it is historic. I mean, you think about at the time, the Cowboys had been to 8 Super Bowls of the 30 that were played. They'd won 5 of them. We've almost played 30 since then, and they haven't even been to a conference championship game. And so that has been the step that they were so close to. And especially in recent memory, 2007 wasn't that recent, but that was a really talented Cowboys team that was the number 1 overall seed, and they fell short of the title game. In 2014, Dez caught it and all that jazz, but they fell short of the NFC title game. In 2016, they fell short, against an incredible 3rd and 20 play between Aaron Rodgers and Jared Cook. In 2018, they just kind of got beat by the Rams. And so they've been close. They've knocked at the door. And incidentally, Mike McCarthy has been the guy who kind of shut it on them twice in the last 15 or so years. But I think they have to get there just because that is the uncharted territory for them. And, that could happen and then they could lose that game. And a lot of Cowboys fans would still call the season a disappointment, but that would be measurable growth which I think is what this team is in a position where they have to ultimately experience.
So what happens if they fall short of that? Who would be accountable if this is a team that gets in but loses in a wild card round or doesn't get in? Who takes the fall?
And I think that's also context driven because how do they lose the wild card round? Is it a Des Carter type loss? Do they get blown out? Like obviously all that matters, but generally speaking, I think the general manager would be at fault, but that's somebody who's not going to fire himself. And I think people would point to Mike McCarthy, but I do think I've been less critical. At least I've come around to be less critical on Mike McCarthy over the offseason. I think everybody has obviously dealt with the challenges that the world has presented us over the last year and a half. But something that I think is lost with Mike McCarthy is he took an entire year off and literally planned how he would do things when he got back. I mean, he was very vocal about that plan, which has sort of led to some criticism of his. But I mean, that plan was thrown out the window like on day 6, obviously when the pandemic first hit. And so he had to adjust. The Cowboys obviously lost Dak Prescott last year. Between their 2 starting tackles, Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins, they lost 30 of 32 possible games last year. They lost Leighton Vander Esch for spells last year. And in talking about this subject, I always say that I hate this, and that's true. I hate to blend this into football like it matters, but the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy specifically had an incredibly emotional year. Mike McCarthy, obviously a longtime Green Bay Packers head coach. Ted Thompson passed away. Kevin Green passed away. The Cowboys themselves were dealt an enormous tragedy just ahead of Thanksgiving. And so a lot of different factors, some more important than others. Obviously, the grand scheme of life matters more than football. But just one of those things where I feel like they never had a chance to come up and breathe. And so I think they finally got that over the course of the offseason. And so I think this is the true kind of first litmus test we are getting at Mike McCarthy, given that, injuries are going to happen and whatnot, and you have to adjust to those. But if they lost the wild card round, I think, again, given that it is kind of his first real crack at it, I think that he would still be safe. I think they would have to implode, like utterly implode, for him to be fired. And there would have to be drama. There would have to be, reports out of the locker room and things like that. I really think it would take something seismic for him to be moved on from by the team.
All right, let's fast forward to the Thursday night opener, Dallas at Tampa Bay. What would be the number one key for the Cowboys to find a way to be in that game or win it in Tampa opening night?
I think it's to generate turnovers. And, Tom Brady's obviously an incredibly intellectual quarterback, the greatest in that capacity and in every capacity of all time. And so, I think we all generally trust the Cowboys offense is going to find a way to score, between 21 and 28 points, give plus minus 3 or whatever. And I think that that's enough, more often than not in the NFL. And I think that the Cowboys defense just has to swing drives. You have to have 14-point swings. And they've been on the wrong end of that for not just last season, for a very long time. And I think that they've got to find a way to do that. And even if it's just forcing 3 and outs, dominating time of possession, because the Cowboys have just been incredibly finicky with how they've been bad. Kind of like the possession thing I told you about with the first 4 games last year. I mean, it's actually difficult to believe that it was that bad, especially, living in it and then looking back on it. And so I think they just have to steal possessions, and I think they have to steal games. And I think, a lot of Cowboys fans think that this team is going to be a playoff team, and they're budgeting a loss for against the Buccaneers. Or even some are budgeting losses against Tampa and the Chargers in weeks 1 and 2 and still think this team is a playoff team. And some of that has to do with the low quality of the division around them. But I think that teams steal games on a season. And I think when you steal games you're not supposed to win, games you were not favored in, that's the difference between if you are the 4 seed wild card, being that in the 2 seed, being that in the 1 seed that has the bye. And it's about piling all those things you can steal, because you're gonna lose games you were supposed to win too. And so you have to end up on the positive side of that overall margin.
RJ, great insight. It's crazy to think we're just a couple of weeks away. We appreciate it. Thanks for doing it today.
Of course, anytime. Really appreciate you having me.
Again, if you're a fan of the Cowboys, RJ is a must-follow on Twitter. He's at RJ Ochoa. That's at RJ Ochoa. And you got to bookmark his site as well, bloggingtheboys.com. That's bloggingtheboys.com. Also, this reminder, don't miss the best high school football games from this past season with Classic Game Time. Fridays on YourView. That's Classic Game Time this summer, only on YourView. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and auto-download future episodes on whichever podcast platform you're listening to this podcast on right now. Please leave a review as well. And again, if you wouldn't mind following me on Twitter at Jon Schaeffer. That's JONSCHAEFFER. For previous episodes or more information about Left Coast Sports, you can visit yourview.com. That's YURVIEW.com. As always, we thank you for listening, and we'll catch up again next week right here on Left Coast Sports with Jon Schaeffer.
Let's go!